Before we, as we said that there are a lot of these abbreviations going on that we want to demystify for our readers and for the common man today, and to give us some clarity on what these abbreviations mean, how the new policy measures and regulatory mechanisms under them are impacting the real estate ecosystem, what more can be done. For that, we have the country's top legal minds today joining us here. So let's move on to our first session of the day. And let me introduce our panel members for the topic of environment, social and governance, that is ESG. They will be talking about progressive opportunities and limitations for real estate. So our eminent moderator for this session is Sudhir Mishra, Advocate, Supreme Court of India, and founder and managing partner, Trust Legal Advocates and Consultants. Mr. Mishra, who is India's prolific environmental lawyer, is the chairperson of Environment and Climate Change Committee of Society of Indian Law Firms. He, in last 20 years, has appeared in more than 120 litigations concerning environmental issues before the Honorable Supreme Court of India, dozens of high courts, national green tribunals, the Central Empowered Committee of Supreme Court, and statutory pollution control boards. Mr. Mishra, a very warm welcome to you. And let me also now welcome our speakers of the day in an alphabetical order. I welcome Mr. Amresh Kumar Singh, Partner Real Estate and Dispute Resolution HSA Advocates, who has over 28 years of experience in real estate and has advised leading private equity funds, renewable energy entities, real estate developers, financial institutions, overseas funds, government funds, and HNIs. Our next eminent panel member is Abdullah, head of ESG at Lodha, and he has been instrumental in formulating Lodha's sustainability strategy. He is currently focusing on decarbonization of Lodha's value chain and products. He also led the formation of Lodha Net Zero Urban Accelerator, which focuses on embodied carbon, passive designs, equipment efficiency, renewable integration, green mobility, and green finance. Our next expert speaker of this panel is Mr. Bose Verghese, Senior Director, ESG Practice at Cyril, Amarchand, Mangaldas. Mr. Verghese has over 30 years of experience across industries and consulting space. With nearly 10 years of experience in the US and over 20 years of experience in India, his expertise spans over the diverse fields of sustainability, environment, climate change, and clean tech. Our next and final member, let me welcome Mr. Shabbir Kanchwala, Chief Sustainability Officer and Senior Vice President Project Coordination at Raheja Corp. An evangelist for the green cause, Shabbir spearheads the sustainability initiatives for real estate, hotels, and malls of Raheja Group, amongst other key functions, which include purchase, contracts, and project coordination. With more than 3 decades of real estate experience, Shabbir has come up the ranks to be known as the torchbearer of the Green Initiative. So this is our eminent panel. And Mr. Mishra, let me hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Sapna. Thanks for this opportunity. And this is a very something very close to my heart in talking about environment, talking about sustainability. All my friends are here have already been part of various panels with them. And I would say that ESG has become very active in 5 years, maybe 5 to 6 years, but the challenge for real estate sector, whatever I've seen in courts before the National Green Tribunal or various high courts or the Supreme Court, believe that this is one sector which has to acclimatize the environmental and governance realities much faster than any other sector. And I think that structuring of this ESG world and seeing that 2 of the top real estate developers have a full-time ESG wing under them now. We have come a long, long way, and representing virtually everybody from Kedia to developers who are throughout the country. Thing strikes the country, whether it's an air pollution scenario in capital or to be stopped or to be asked to close down. And one reason was that we always were a reactive body We were never an active body so far as environment, sustainability, governance is concerned. Social is something which Mr. Verghese will talk a little more about. So in this perspective, it will be better that first we understand that what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years, so far as the large real estate companies are concerned, and it would be appropriate that we ask Shabbir bhai first, that what do you think, how Raheja Group has defined the entire sustainability bit, and what is happening on ESG in your company? And then we as lawyers will come later on that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you. So, Raheja Corp, we started on this journey in the year 2006, 2007, when we signed a memorandum of understanding with CI, Green Building Council, that whatever we construct would be sustainable buildings in the West and South. So whether it's a green home or a green office or a green hotel or a green mall is what we were committed to do. We were actually the first ones in India to have done that, and people thought we are crazy that we are spending the money, extra money in going green. But I guess, I've been working for a company which is in inception since 1956, and we don't look at business only from a cost point of view. There is a long-term and medium-term requirement. And now, so many years, there are billions of square feet of sustainable buildings in India. And India stands, I believe, third after US and China as the largest number of green buildings in the world. Raheja Corp, obviously, we have the largest green building footprint in the country, and we were recognized by the President of India, Dr. Abdul Kalam, as having done that. We've been working on completing the circle of sustainability, whether it's carbon neutrality, whether it is ESG, whether it's DGSI, whether it is something to do with water conservation. That's something which we have started in the last 5 or 6 years. So we look at ESG more from a perspective that other than obviously being an investor's requirement, which is now in the last 4 or 5 years, investors have been asking for this in a big way. Having said that, the E part anyway, we were having a lot of things already done, in the sense that we had building certified by the US Green Building Council and others. We had other things going. From the governance part and the social part, as a company, we've always been doing a lot of work, whether it's the SL Raheja Hospital at Bandra, or whether we have a college, or whether we look at Hyderabad, where we revitalize the Durgam Cheru Lake. So we worked on that. We've got companies who are listed, whether it is Mindspace Business Street or Chalet Hotels, or so there are 4 ESGs which are happening parallelly in my company. One is for the commercial, one is for residential, and one is for the hotels, and one is for the malls. So that's about, we're trying to complete the circle in doing that.
Yeah,
thank you.
But very well started, and I would say that putting a name and defining the sector, these are the big companies which had that responsibility. So, Mr. Abdullah, in Lodha, because Lodha is a very aspirational enterprise so far as the real estate sector is concerned, how do you look at ESG, and what you are doing prior to ESG, when ESG was not something which was very hyped, and what you are doing now, which you feel should be accommodated, or I would say that adopted by more real estate sectors, especially in North India, because both the companies which are represented here are, I think, Bombay-based and Maharashtra-based. North India is entirely different territory. We'll talk about it. I and Josh both will be talking about it. So what is happening in ESG in Lodha, and what the country needs to look in Lodha? What is inspiring about your ESG?
Okay. So hello, everyone. So at Lodha, we are actually governed by our do good, do well philosophy. And the work on ESG is not something new. It has been going on for more than a decade. And the example itself is, take the case of our flagship Palava city, which is a model of sustainable urbanization. And that was conceived more than a decade back. Today, it is as big, where almost 2 lakh people already live. So it's a long journey. And we had been on that for quite some time. But during the early part of last decade, it was mainly sustainability, smart developments, green buildings, and so on. But I think beyond our own internal factors, over last 4 or 5 years, there are certain external reasons also why this ESG has come up. And as Shabbir Bhai was telling, so there is specific, inclination by investors. There is regulatory movement in that direction as well. The overall sentiment is also changing. Therefore, there is a need to quantify the ESG performance and ESG impact. And as a prepared company, we were already in a position to, face any benchmark. And that is why you would see that, in last 1-2 years, we could very easily participate in the leading global benchmarks. And we have within real estate, we have the highest score in S&P corporate sustainability assessment. We are globally, I think 14th there. We are globally top 10 real estate development sub-industry in Sustainalytics. We are number 4th in World Benchmarking Alliance, and so on. So when we fall within the top 10 companies globally on such benchmarks, it's not something that we could do in last 2-3 years. This is something that was always in making for last, say, 10-15 years. And it's not only environment. I mean, if you look at the social impact that we had been doing, and even on governance, I mean, we as a company has been consistently growing. And I would say that, I mean, we grew 20 times in 20 years. So that would not have been possible without a strong governance backbone. So the practices in all these dimensions were always there. Focus was always there. The only thing that has changed is that we could align to a framework and report to a framework. Plus, the additional focus which has come up on the climate risks. And therefore, we have created Lodha Net Zero Urban Accelerator last year in partnership with RMI, which is working on the overall carbon emissions of the entire spectrum of built environment, starting from embodied carbon, going all the way to the supply side. So that's one thing which has been added, that additional focus on handling climate risks in last 3-4 years, plus the manner of disclosing and reporting and competing in the wider benchmarking space.
Very well said. Mr. Verghese, I'll come to you. And before I come to you, I tell you, I'll look up to you for demystifying this whole thing, the ESG per se, each of the word. Also, the fact that whenever this crisis happens with regard to a real estate sector, and if environment is interfacing that crisis, like I'll tell you, when the pollution peaked during 2018 in the National Capital Region, they banned the construction. Now you have a gradation system, and that gradation system is quite effective, and real estate sector construction is not banned right at the outset. It takes a lot of time now by the Air Monitoring Commission to actually ban the real estate sector's construction. But in 2018, I had told CREDAI that rather than just facing a blanket ban, what do we do with our environmental management plans? When we do an environmental management plan for each of the real estate projects, so I said, let's combine 5 of the projects in North India, and how much water we have saved, how much sand curtains we have put, how we protect our society, how many laborers really have to go without food, and how do we protect their wages. All these factors we put on a 2-pager and put it before the court that, look, this is as important an industry as is steel and cement. In any case, they are dependent upon real estate sector. So what is happening now? Real estate sector needs to, so far as the environment is concerned, they are normally seen as a villain. Oh, a lot of construction is happening in Delhi, and that's the reason for pollution. So what are your thoughts about it? And then you talk about both the governance and the social apart from the environment, which I'll be speaking more of.
Yeah, thank you. That's I mean, you put a big onus on my shoulders of demystifying ES and G. Um, look, I mean, the built environment in general, right? I mean, this is a key part of the economy. And especially from the environment point of view, this is a big contributor to the environment impacts. And there are two ways to look at it. One is purely from an inside out look. We are in this as what impact our business has on the environment, on the society. That's an inside out look. That's really looking at the impacts. The second key part is how investors are looking at us.
Yes.
Try to inside look. That has a lens of risk. They will look, I mean, that's where, including governance, a lot of things become very important under ESG. I mean, investor will look at where the risks lie, where the business can, face a hurdle, like what you said, right? If the construction is outright stopped, I mean, that's a huge risk. So this is where, when you look at ESG and when you look at for areas for action, you look at key, what we call the material areas, right? Purely from an impact point of view, and also from how investors and outside world looks at a risk point of view. In the ideal world, that should be the same. But, and it may not always be the same. Today, this sector, the prime mover is the climate change impact. The built environment globally is responsible for about 40% of the global emissions.
Yes.
And it's not a standing building, I mean, including its embedded emissions, which means the steel, cement, and the entire contributing industry output, 40% is like, a huge chunk of global emissions. So there is so much of focus, and the sector is actually going to head that way. So that part is going to be, important. It's never going to go away. Valuations, investment considerations, all will hinge on how energy efficient the building is, how you are embracing the whole new net zero building movement. Can you be an early adopter there, and can you actually push that envelope? And the social side, it's been probably neglected a little bit, but it's going to come up. We know the value chain of the sector has a huge social intersection. And, from labor rights to human rights to child, I mean, all those things will come up. Probably, picking up on examples or bad examples and then, blowing it up to a really big, risk factor. The G is going to be important. We have seen enough examples like the in case everybody is aware of. G again, because of these complexities, because of the stakeholder government approvals, NOCs, land deals, the governance has to be really robust. And for an investor, I think it's going to be really, really important.
Yes.
And many of these things are equally important for the consumer as well. Today, if you look at, especially the commercial stock, almost 50% of Indian commercial stock is somehow rated under the sustainability rating, rated buildings. And at least commercial, leasing, a lot of global corporations are looking at, and in fact, they're putting it up as a stipulation. I want, LEED rated building. And the customer is also putting a lot of emphasis on it.
Yes.
Not so much in the residential space, but definitely in the commercial space.
Absolutely. Very well said. Initial thoughts. Amresh Kumar Singh ji, I'll come to you. You are a partner with one of the best energy firms in the country. And I wanted the most important part to be addressed by you, that energy is a very important factor of this whole ESG nomenclature. And also knowing the fact that most of our real estate projects are not energy efficient. Even now, they are not energy efficient. And even if you go and see their internal systems, the internal air conditioning, we take pride in keeping 16 to 17 degree as temperature. The global mandates and the SDG goals mandate say keep it 24 degrees. And we really waste our energy. So we did a sustainability report for one of the largest universities in India, private university, OP Jindal University. And we actually computed how each of the room uses water, how many units of electricity they use. If they use the wash machine, how much water they consume, how much waste they generate. And we got some staggering data. One of the Supreme Court benches in a largely, I would say, investor-driven litigation of a real estate nature actually said that why don't you have your own voluntary reports? Why you are only dependent upon the government for whatever government is expecting you, like the EIA reports or EMP reports. But energy is something which has not been addressed. I think Mr. Verghese rightly said that a lot of things are now investor is demanding. Consumer is also demanding the certifications. But where do you see the energy efficiency part, Mr. Verghese? Mr. Singh? Yeah.
You're on mute, I think.
He's on mute. He's on mute.
Yeah, when we look at all the regulations, which the municipal authorities kind of are not drafting into their, municipal laws by which the constructions have to happen, we can just say that it's still at a nascent stage, but a considerable effort is being put into to reduce the carbon footprint. And therefore, there are a lot of codes which are really, coming into existence. So like, for instance, we have the Energy Conservation Building Code. Now that sets a minimum energy standard for new commercial buildings, which have a particular load and all that. Now the effective implementation of code provides comfort to occupants by adopting passive design strategies and daylight integrations. So it is technologically neutral, promotes renewable energy, and also emphasizes on the life cycle cost of building. Now, there are various levels of energy performance standards in the Energy Conservation Building Code. And, that is for, and that has a bearing on the efficiency. So ECBC compliant buildings has approximately, it is said to have 25% savings. ECBC building approximately 35% savings, and compliance with super ECBC buildings with show energy savings by almost 50%. The code is applicable to buildings or building complexes that have a connected load, of a certain intensity. So, these are the things. Now, building intended for private residential purposes only are not covered by the code as of yet.
Yes.
So, simply stated, it is mandatory for only commercial buildings. Now, we also have the National Building Code. It is a set of guidelines meant to regulate construction activities in commercial as well as residential space across the country. The code presents a framework for all agencies involved in construction works, including public works departments, other government departments, private construction agencies, and real estate developers. So therefore, all of that is still at a nascent stage, but moving in the right directions.
Yeah, very well. Sir, but just tell me, Mr. Singh, one thing that as a law firm which has such a clear insight on the energy sector, you can say that real estate sector is they have very large consumption of energy. And you talked about what are the regulations which actually attach importance to that. But do you really feel that real estate sector needs a completely new cleaning, and they need to completely realign their energy needs, which because of the new climate initiatives and the new climate parameters, it's absolutely important for our country?
Yeah, I mean, that is the need of the hour. But, having said that, it is not an elusive sector which needs it. It's a composite requirement of all the sectors. But so far as the real estate sector is concerned now, historically, we have had series of judgments, judicial precedents, which have considered all these aspects. But of late, now these are getting very, very focused. Like, recently when the NGT said, when they talked about the environmental compensation for causing degradation, they were very clear that it is not going to be a formal or casual or symbolic amount which is required to be levied. And they clearly laid down that it is going to be a substantive and adequate amount, which must be levied for restoration of the environment. So therefore, all of these things are very, very important, that a proper synchronization has to happen. And energy is a very important thing, because energy in some way or the other is having a direct bearing, not only with the environment, but also with social and governance.
Absolutely. Very well put. Thanks a lot, sir. Mr. Kanchwala, I'll come to you. And I have so we are nicely going in a direction where we are trying to demystify. Tell me one thing. I was representing Credai, Karnataka, and this entire lake issue in Bangalore, you are aware about it, the construction which happened around the lakes, and there were a lot of issues with regard to what is a area which was not a revenue area. It was area where construction should not have happened. There are two challenges which, in my understanding, which the real estate sector faces, despite NGT or courts being not very proactive now on actually coming in between the real estate projects, except for the Twin Towers thing which happened by the Supreme Court in the NCR. What are the shining examples you want to share, not only of Raheja's, from other projects? And this is something which you will have to mirror for other projects, that everybody should collate this data of good governance, good environmental principles, good social integrations. Each one of them will have some important thing. Like there is a project which is happening in Bangalore, and people are paying 40 to 50% premium for almost like a private plantation near their apartment. So if people are really keen to get properties which mirror environment, let's put it more clearly, do you think it's a good idea that or you are doing it, exchanging the good ESG examples from real estate projects?
Okay, thank you. So primarily, if you look at this from a customer perspective, I think there is a beginning, in the sense that they are looking at, because the millenniums and the children are actually driving this. They are asking them that, are you working in a green office? Are we staying in a green home? Why don't you send me to a green school? So that's where the flow is. For commercial, obviously, there is my principles in Europe and US, since we are in the IT space, Mindspace or Commerzone, and they obviously understand that when they occupy a green building, they're going to spend and use less water and power. And then obviously using less power means drawing less power from a coal-based power plant.
Yes.
And especially in a country like India, where water is more important in terms of availability. If we try and reduce by recycling, by using the reflushing water in gardening, in air conditioning, you're going to reduce your intake. And obviously, from our natural resources, you're going to draw less water. Having said that, when you look at the social and the governance part for a real estate project, I think the real estate industry has to work on that along with the E part. Right now, also, I have been told that only 40% of builders in India are actually looking at environmental sustainable building. There's a huge chunk which is still not doing that. So bodies like the US Green Building Council and CI, Indian Green Building Council, are doing the bit to educate them and to get more and more of them. So customers to pay a higher price, I would disagree, because whether we look at our rental customers in leasing, so maybe in the last 5-7 years, it's become like a done thing. You have to give me a green building, right? Whether it's gold or platinum, or you have to give me a green mall or a green hotel. So there is no real premium in that sense, but you obviously differentiate. And if you're not going to do it, you are not going to be able to sell the house or lease your building. Thank you.
Yeah, but the very surprising, my own understanding of the sector is that I stay in Noida, and I stay in sector 40, and just across the road, Godrej launches a project which was sold in 3 hours, because they promised a private forest. And for Noida, it was something unreal, because Noida, no builder had previously tried to do, except for 1 or 2 smaller builders who had quality, timely possession, timely construction, or following all the government laws. And this was apparently the first major, I would say the entire project was sold, the first major event for Godrej, which happened last year, maybe last year, in Sector 45. So for Bombay or for Maharashtra or for maybe even Bangalore and some pockets who come in that 40%, where people are clear about demanding the greener periphery or green buildings or green accommodation. In North India, I would say it won't cross even 15%, 10 to 15%. And that's because most of the builders we represent, and I have seen them, that forget about having an environmental norm, the G becomes a big challenge, and that remains a challenge even now. It has streamlined because of the better governance which is happening in fewer states, but it remains a challenge. So there are companies which, if they will come to North India, they will introduce the green parameters. It has not even been introduced so far, I would say. So maybe Godrej was one of the first to start. I will come to Mr. Abdullah, and I will ask you that what is your own assessment about governance? Because how much governance actually decides the fate of a ESG? And governance, we are talking about the corporate governance and also the governance which we have to deal with, the rules and regulation part of it. So which are the states which you feel are up on it, and which are the states which needs to catch up?
So as I was talking about our do good, do well philosophy, I think governance is very central to any company taking up ESG, because unless it is part of the vision, and unless it is acknowledged by the management that these are long-term risks which can erode the value creation opportunities. So governance is, I think, central, because the will has to come up, and then the whole system has to be oriented around it. Now, in our case, while we have a full ESG strategy, but we do understand that these are such risks which, if not addressed in time, can become an issue. And not only that, these are major opportunities for not only doing good, doing well, but it is also a nation building opportunity.
Yes.
So there, it all obviously comes from the top. Then on internal governance, once you have a vision, then that vision makes you create a strategy and a process. Now this process and this performance needs to be internally evaluated, controlled, and guided. So unless there are such mechanisms in a company, a lot of strategies can fall flat. And our experience is that it's a very top-down approach can only make good progress in ESG. And unless the internal governance structure is well in place, I think it's not possible to make progress. Coming to the from the national angle,
yes.
So if you look at the efforts by, say, the Ministry of Environment and Forest in terms of the environmental impact assessments, if you look at Bureau of Energy Efficiency and the codes, and I would also like to add that now a residential ECBC is also in place with the name of Eco-Niwas Samhita. And you also look at SEBI and this whole BRSR framework, which is a very welcome thing, and the way they are also trying to expand it to even the supply chain in a larger pool of companies. And also trying to evolve it, and also trying to give it a context and flavor. So from the government side, from internal in the company, and also from the requirements which come from other external forces, I think it's all shaping up. It's all it will evolve, obviously, in some time, and these mechanisms will be a great help in orienting it in the right direction. Now, when you're asking about how it is in various states, I may not be competent to advise about that. And I would say that for forward-looking organizations, it is you would always find that they are much ahead of what the requirements are coming from the regulators, or whatever frameworks are being proposed, because they are looking at it as a transition risk and thinking much deeper into the future, and trying to stay ahead of the curve. So it again comes back and boils down to the internal governance, where there is a much deeper, much long-term view on that, instead of how the contemporary regulation is evolving.
Yes. So on this, I just wanted to share that TERI has been doing a lot of work on this. TERI of late has been working with CREDAI very regularly, and to the places where Mr. Kanchwala said that the 40% or 60% people who needs to further get education on the basic principles of ESG, on introducing the sustainable architecture, sustainable development. TERI is doing a lot of work. TERI has also started its own grading, which is Griha and other kind of grading which they are working, apart from the LEED certification. And even in courts, when you are representing a large developer and it is facing a motivated public interest litigation on water issue or sewage or other kind of issue, these certifications like LEED or Griha, they not only insulate you from a lot of apathy, and court really supports such progressive and proactive certification, but it also makes an image about you and creates a very right kind of climate, which has happened much before the fund and other aspects came into being. Mr. Verghese, I'll ask you the very important part of this discussion, that the FDI which flows into real estate sector, I think 25% of the entire FDI now in some form comes into the real estate sector. And much of it is also coming from the green funds or sustainable funds. And it has really enhanced in last 2-3 years. What Mr. Abdullah says, maybe the whole industry is now on a bounce, and real estate sector is a large beneficiary. When it comes to funds, how the funds evaluate that this company follows the best ESG practices and this real estate company will put our money?
Very interesting question. Oh, sorry.
Advice. This is an advice actually.
So yeah, so there are probably multiple angles to it. One, so the investors look at probably overall ESG rating, in which maybe a certified building or certification program only a contributor. Okay. ESG for a real estate company is much larger than a particular project getting certified. When you go for a certification of a building, a lot of green funds go into the design and construction and later operation of the building. But at an entity level, ESG is much larger and deeper. So, so if an investor is looking at investing in a real estate company, definitely an ESG rating is something that they would look at. If they're looking at a particular project, they would probably look at the certification and other attributes of that particular project. And, so today, there is something called green taxonomy, which is nothing but sort of a predefined metrics for investors, telling them, okay, these particular sectors and this particular type of projects are considered green. For example, the EU has a green taxonomy. India, we don't have a taxonomy, but certain sectors intuitively are green. We know that. Yes. In most of the defined taxonomies, green buildings are defined, is included in the green taxonomy. And therefore, funding going into green buildings is considered green. It contributes to, global emission reduction. So but just recently, I think we have some SEBI guidance coming in or giving an initial preliminary set of taxonomy. I don't think the green building is particular. It is called out. Green building is called out, and that is one aspect that probably investors will look at. And green building by nature, by definition, is within a taxonomy, or even if you don't have a taxonomy, it will be considered a green investment. You could potentially look at raising green bonds for a green building portfolio. REITs, a lot of them are trying to have not only have certified buildings in the portfolio, but also have a high rating, ESG rating. They especially they like this GRESB benchmark. It's a global sustainability benchmark for real estate companies. And I think all the three listed REITs today in India, they are all 5-star rated.
Wow.
So that means they have very good ESG performance already. And you will see this sort of transition. Companies that are looking to set rate, having a rate, they are definitely deliberately moving into an ESG framework. I mean, that's something that they definitely do. They know through setting high ESG goals and performance, they can probably attract better investors and more money. So so that's how this sector is moving. As I said, this sector is a big lever in the global climate action, and therefore this will continue to attract and will continue to be pushed. Today it's just green building, certified building. Tomorrow it will be different levels of net zero buildings are already happening, right? 100% driven by renewable energy. Even the embedded carbon, trying to use as much low carbon materials as possible, and then offsetting the remaining emissions, and therefore getting green building or net zero building. They're going to be extremely attractive for investors. I think both things will get in that direction.
Very well said. Amresh sir, I'll ask you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
If you allow me to add, Mindspace Business REIT, our company, we were the first ones. We've closed a $500 million green bonds for our portfolio. So it has been a journey, but it has been interesting and fruitful because not many, the first green bond for a REIT and not many green bonds right now in the country. And I think this is the way to go, right? To differentiate between the, what they call as greenwashing or, somebody actually building a sustainable building, which is actually, engineering more than architecture, what we call as passive architecture and active engineering. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Well put. Amresh Kumar Singh sir, I'll tell you that one of the projects we were before the courts was connected with a large software park in Delhi. A large software park in Mumbai, Andheri. And while doing the defending the project, we realized that it has one of the best sanctuary for birds. It's one of the largest software parks. So I'm not taking the name, I'm just telling it. And that bird sanctuary, we got basically Forest Survey of India and Wildlife Institute of India to do a combined report. That how this is so unique, which had no purpose or anything. They just created it because those birds were coming and more plantation happened, more such trees came, and in 8 to 10 years that became the biggest sanctuary. So it's one of the it can't be recognized as a bird sanctuary, but it has like a lot of birds come there, thousands of birds come there. And when we presented this report of Wildlife Institute of India to the court, they said that why such examples are not being told. When a good real estate project happens and they are a sanctuary to any kind of vegetation or flora or fauna, if that comes as a story format in any kind of story, we'll not be just running after Tim Cook and Steve Jobs. We'll be talking about our own stories. And that is what is important, that in real estate projects, like I saw the Totals project in Bangalore, that you can't even see the apartment. It's all cloud. There is a cloud cover. Plants are like a cloud cover for them. And so these stories need to come out. That is one. And the second thing I want to ask you, what do you think about the water certification now? Energy certification, everybody is talking about. The water, uses of water is going to be a bigger issue for real estate sector. If you are talking about ESG, the E part, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so, I agree with you. Absolutely. I mean, that's the issue. But, let me just address the first aspect of it, where you talked about the green cover. So it would have two components. One is the mandatory component. So typically when a building is being constructed, there would be a layout plan in conjunction with the zoning plan, and that would kind of, that lay down that what is going to be the green cover and all that, and that is going to be absolutely sacrosanct.
Correct.
If there is any deviation there, then, all kinds of liabilities, that is available under law, whether it's in the nature of absolute liability or punitive liability or criminal liability, vicarious liability, all of that would get triggered in. Then the second component is that in the event the developer, like what you talked about as a forest element in a living condominium, then, the benefit which will accrue to the developer is an increased FAR.
Absolutely.
And obviously now with RERA coming in, with globalization and all that, the consumers having deeper pockets, they are very, very well educated and aware. They are very, very mindful of all these strict judicial decisions, punitive actions which is being taken against developers. So they would really look forward to getting into projects which are of this nature. Now, so far as the water and things are concerned, water extraction itself is a big issue,
Yes.
which is being monitored by the tribunal, Green Tribunal, and also the Supreme Court, where they have linked it to a breach of the governance of the company.
Correct.
So there have been judgments like that Upahar judgment and so many other judgments where the Supreme Court and National Commission have clearly stated that such kind of breaches are almost, breaches of the governance obligations of a company.
Yes.
And things like that. So there are various legislation in place. We have the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974, which is mandatory in nature. Then we have the Air Prevention Act, which is also mandatory in nature. And typically all the projects now, they have to get the environmental impact assessment,
Yes.
certification under the Environmental Protection Act. So therefore, it is very, very important, so for the developers, what is very important is to be on the right side of compliance.
Yes. And then do anything more. And do anything more, it's always beneficial for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when they are kind of navigating around a particular circular and all that, my advice to developers would always be that leave a space for interplay. Do not take over aggressive interpretation so as to circumvent the law, because now, the environmental issues are getting very, very aggressive with the kind of actions which are being, taken by the respective forums and courts. It is very, very important that all the developers fall in line in compliance, which is not only going to give them longevity, but is also going to improve and buttress the sentiments of the customers. That's exactly what it is. Now, if you look at the RERA law also on its authorities, competence, requires people to be very, very well informed of the environmental laws.
Yes.
And there are lot of obligations which have been put on the promoters to make sure that every project is in compliance and things like that. So therefore, now it is very, very imperative and important that, all environmental laws be complied with by the developers, because code would construe every breach, on the continuum of ESG.
Correct. Correct. Very well said, sir. Just final words now. So, Mr. Kanchwala, what do you think is one major factor which has completely changed in favor of developers, the respectability part of it, that real estate projects, and that's what I wish also for the projects in rest of part of the country, that you are now setting examples for good governance and sustainability. That's what you said with your examples, the kind of funding you are saying. So what is your next frontier now on ESG? What is your next challenge on ESG?
So, we are looking at, we've given targets for carbon neutrality. We've given targets for net zero. We've given targets for, governance, because since we are listed companies, whether it is Mindspace Business REIT or Chalet, the governance levels. Just to quickly tell you, when SEBI had called us for a presentation, they were only interested in the environment part of the ESG more than everything else, because that's something which, and now I believe SEBI has got a lot of people whom they have recruited from IIT and young guys who actually, when they look at the portfolio, they are equally interested in the sustainability part of ESG. So that was refreshing for me when I saw that. So going forward, I think the government of India has given targets, 2017 net zero. The state governments are looking at it. Solar is in a big way, EV vehicles. So whether, we are also part of the climate group where we have committed for RE100, that is 100% renewable energy, then EV100 electrical vehicles or RP100. So this is the way forward, whether developers like it or not, because obviously there's, like we all say, there's only one planet, right? And we are grandchildren need to be given that from us rather than, so there is, we want a certain GDP growth, there is a certain population in the country. So when you construct any kind of structure, home, hotel, malls, schools, why not make them sustainable so that you use less power and water?
Very well said. Mr. Abdullah, what is your next goal on ESG?
Okay, so as I said earlier, we see this as a nation building opportunity. And we are quite uniquely placed by our large township models, where instead of making a contained real estate project, a small, we have city scale projects like Palava and Upper Thane, where the scale is as big as that. Like we have made more than 500 buildings there, more than 2 lakh people already live there. So the project scale is that. Ultimately, there will be more than 1 million people living there. So this urban model is something for us as a living lab. And we have created something called Lodha Net Zero Urban Accelerator in partnership with a US-based think tank, Rocky Mountain Institute, where we have broken the entire emissions of the built environment into its component parts, including embodied carbon, passive designs, equipment efficiency, clean energy, green mobility, and so on, and green finance. So with all of this, we are trying to decarbonize this whole built environment. And we also want to offer this as a template for industry at large to follow. So in that manner, we have this nation building opportunity. Similarly, we think, very deeply about women empowerment as well as education. So our entire social focus is on that, and we are supporting program Unnati, which is for upskilling and training women, as well as the Lodha Genius program, where we are. So the idea is to pick bright students who will be the future of the country, and handhold them until their complete education, so that they understand that when they reach the position of influence, how can they give back to society? So apart from only building the nation, but also passing this on. So that way, there are huge set of opportunities, and we are very well placed to take them up.
Yeah, Mr. Verghese, you are coming up with any knowledge paper or something for ESG in real estate?
Yeah, in fact, just yesterday I was, talking about it. Yes, there would be an article, some story coming out soon. But I just wanted to say, this sort of the future of ESG and the real estate in India. Look at us as a young country, and we have set a 2070 net zero goal. By 2070, our real estate and what we will say in 2070, most of it, probably more than 80% of it is yet to be built.
Yes.
And by the time we should be transforming, this economy and everything. So for us, this is a big opportunity and even bigger responsibility, so that we follow this ESG, we support this whole decarbonization, and we get to net zero. And the sector has a role to play.
Yeah, wonderful. Mr. Singh, last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very important because, the way, these concepts and ideas have got integrated into law, and with so much of proactive stand being taken by the National Green Tribunal and the Supreme Court and the Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission and so on and so forth, it's very, very important to be on the right side of law and be absolutely compliant. I mean, one example would be the Great India Bustard bird issue in Rajasthan, where really, I mean, the message is loud and clear that when it comes to environmental protection, that is going to be predominant. But in the same breath, very recently, Supreme Court relaxed some of these eco-sensitive parameters to allow certain residential fabric of a village to develop. So again, the sustainable development of environment along with development, as enunciated by the Honorable Supreme Court, is what is key and is what is going to be the predominant going forward.
Wonderful. Very well said. Thank you. Thank you, my panelists, all of you, for coming together and doing such an amazing debate on ESG, on environment, which is refreshing. Hope to connect again. All over to you, Sapna.
Mr. Mishra, you spoke about few of the instances. You spoke about some examples. What are your last words about ESG? And in fact, one of our questions that we have received is that when we say ESG, the E is still taken care of because they have ratings, green ratings. But what about the social and governance? How do we verify those claims?
So I will say about all three, actually. Environment, I'm very aspirational, as rightly said by my co-panelists, that the courts have set a momentum. They have created a culture for accountability. And now the courts have actually slowed down. You can see NGT not being that active in last 2-3 years, but the momentum has been set. So environment is largely taken care. I would still recommend that a lot of proactive knowledge papers, stories, successes of our individual projects need to come out. Maybe Realty Plus can compile few of such stories. And I say that stories are the best way to connect. Like you can see, everybody knows Apple as a story. That's why Tim Cook is welcomed like this in our country. So we should bring those stories. Governance is a major problem. In my understanding, both the corporate governance, which a Lodha or a Raheja or Hina Nandani will have, I will write their governance parameters and corporate governance principles to translate into the projects which are happening in Banaras and Lucknow and Noida. Now, if that happens, then the real estate sector will go for a big revamp. The third, the social, I was very touched by what Mr. Abdullah said, that if you are so bullish about education, girl child, going really seriously after it and believing in it, those kind of social linkages will actually deflate a lot of social friction which we have around the projects, where people are disconnected, the labor is disconnected, the communities are disconnected, society is disconnected. So if you can have a bridge with them, the way industry has that bridge, when they do a large project, they have quite a bridge. The local people are stakeholders, the same stakeholding capacity if we can have in the real estate sector. I think both E, S, G, all three can be taken care of.
That's right. One question, we have time for one more question is, are there some legal ESG requirements like we have NGTs and Pollution Control Board? Is there some regulatory body or mechanism for monitoring ESG? Do we have that in India? Mr. Mishra, you can choose who speaker should take that.
Josh, you want to say something about it?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on ESG, I mean, ESG is a really wide spectrum of topics, and there is no single authority or law. And another point is ESG so far, for the most part, been in the voluntary action space. Only now we started specific regulations. Like the first one would be this mandatory disclosure by close by us. But going forward, and since then SEBI has actually rolled out some other decisions as well, we will see an increasing number of regulations. We will probably see a green taxonomy. We will see regulations around funding, financing, and performance, a lot of things. But there are many in our environmental law, in many aspects are embedded in those actually.
Yes.
This is not something, it's not a standalone piece. It has different, it is anchoring in different places. So different touch points already.
Okay, so no single regulatory body, although SEBI has come out with some guidelines for the listed companies. So probably we'll see something coming up soon.
SEBI has BRSR, which for the first 1,500 listed companies, for which, BRSR, a lot of part of it flows from ESG. So, and then they look for, like what we do is before we put anything out, we do assurance. We get an independent third party to audit before we put out the figures. So I think SEBI will look at that in BSR. Anything which is put in the public domain needs to be assured by an independent third party audit, the data which flows out from that.
Right. That's good to hear. And in fact, as Mr. Sudhir Mishra said, that these things have to percolate now down the line to smaller cities, to smaller developers. Big developers are already doing that, and the listed companies are already doing that. So thanks to our panel members for that wonderful discussion and for giving us a lot of clarity on what ESG is all about and how we are moving in that direction. So thank you so much also for taking the audience questions. Thanks everyone, Mr. Mishra, Mr. Amresh Singh, Abdullah, Mr. Bose, Verghese, and Shabbir for joining us here for this session. Thank you so much.